You're listening to Colorado Chamber Office Hours, a podcast that explores what matters most to business. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. Let's get talking. We've spent a lot of time over the past 3 months discussing bills moving through the Colorado legislative session that could regulate or re-examine the regulations on businesses. But any employer knows that no level of regulatory relief matters if you can't find enough talent to make your business run. And for several years now, business leaders in Colorado Chamber surveys have cited a lack of skilled talent as one of their top 3 obstacles to growing here in the Centennial State. Into that discussion this year steps House Bill 1317, a proposal to combine all of the state's higher education and workforce development initiatives into one department with a single front door that can help both learners and employers navigate what is now a complex and often siloed group of talent development efforts spread across 20 different agencies. Now, your first thought upon hearing that might be, wait, a governmental reorganization bill is the supposed answer to our talent shortage? That's a fair question. But to answer it, and a lot of other queries about this bill, we have its author and primary co-sponsor, Colorado House Speaker Julie McCluskey. Speaker McCluskey, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, Ed. I should have had you testify in committee. That was an excellent overview of the work that we're doing and why we're doing it, and thank you.
Hey,
you captured it well.
I only know how to speak in questions, but we'll try to get that across here. Let me start on that note, Madam Speaker, with a version of the hypothetical question that I just posed. You've been working on education bills throughout your term in the House, which is now in its 8th year. Why is it so important to reorganize these initiatives into one department?
Great question, Ed. You know, in my time in office, we have worked to strengthen the initiatives, the programs, the services we provide that graduate from high school all the way through the, middle-aged adult looking for a brand new career. And in some of the bills and legislation we've brought forward, whether it was our post-secondary and workforce integration bill that helped us talk about new and innovative approaches to workforce development with business and industry, our Opportunity Now grants, where we created regional talent hubs in different parts of the state by driving grant dollars to help foster that partnership between business, higher ed, and local workforce. A lot of those efforts have produced pretty terrific results. But what we've now seen is that they're disjointed. They aren't connected. And so where you might have dollars going in that Opportunity Now grant program in a particular region of the state, it's helping. How can we help folks in that area take access of those dollars if they're, say, going to higher ed instead of our Department of Economic Development, right? We have these programs housed in different agencies in the state, and I think until we bring them all together under one roof, we're not maximizing synergy or innovation, or even that kind of cross-pollination that you get when people are working together with the same goal. How do we strengthen Colorado's economy by building a highly skilled, well-educated workforce?
And I think, first of all, it's important to note that this bill doesn't just shift all of these agencies at once. So walk us through the process of how this bill would work and how people are to think about what would be the ideal placement for agencies.
Yeah, smart question. The genesis of this idea began in an executive order from our governor last spring. And he called for a study to be done to look at what are all of the programs. We have over 110 programs and services for folks looking for a job. That's incredible. We identified where all those programs are across the governmental agencies that house them. And we came to recognize that after our report and assessment was completed in November, December, that our next step needed to be a very thoughtful process that included not only state agency voices, but our workforce voices, right? We needed to hear from people that are looking for a job. What is their experience, right? Is going to the local workforce center enough for them, or is it they're frustrated because they have to go first to the Department of Higher Ed and then to CDLE, or to find something on apprenticeships, you've got to go here, right? They're being pointed in different directions. So our bill is a very thoughtful, mapped out process for how we take our current Department of Higher Education and reimagine what that department could be if it was focused on post-secondary education, training, skills building, and ultimately talent development. So what can we do with this one department by bringing together all of these different initiatives and services, and how do we do that over the course of this next year? We're going to build that roadmap. We're not going to actually do the work. We're going to build the roadmap to get us there.
And I was going to ask you what kind of agencies that you envision going under here, but I think you mentioned quite a few of those. So we're talking about everything from the Opportunity Now grants to apprenticeships to things that really do workforce training. So I won't dwell on that, actually. Instead, I want to kind of skip ahead here and to a question that we at the Chamber have faced a lot. We talk to employers who want to partner with government or educators to say, stand up a new workforce training program or help schools modernize their curricula in work-focused classes. But many say they either don't know how to do this or they haven't gotten responses when they try to reach out, maybe to the wrong agency. So how will creation of this department help them to become more of a partner in talent development? It seems like this is going to make figuring out where to go a little bit easier.
You know, we need the voice of our business and industry leaders now in the process of what this roadmap looks like and ultimately what the new department looks like. I think what you're hitting on is such a key moment in how we build better talented, competent, capable workforce members. So our approach, this Transition Advisory Committee, which will be stood up should this bill be successful and reach the governor's desk and be signed, this committee will be working on building a roadmap. It consists of 27 individuals representing a variety of interests, but we've got business leaders on there, not just one, not just two, but a whole swath of folks who can help us understand what is it that business expects, what do our industry leaders need from the state in supporting education, those training, skills, apprenticeship programs, and how can we do it better? So I'm actually really excited to be partnering with business in this effort, to have their voices at the table, and I hope to help to have them lead us through this experience of what they're dealing with, what challenges they're facing. So we create a department that really does add value and improves the experience, not just of the worker, but of the employer.
Now, as we're talking about that, I think we also tend to talk, or we have at least for the past several decades, about higher education or workforce training as an either-or proposition, without acknowledging that some learners are interested in both pathways and may just need some help in determining which is best. So what would it mean to the ability of these tracks to kind of coordinate and work together if this department is created?
You know, I've been in the world of public education for a couple of decades now. And I would say 10, 15 years ago, there was a strong push. We needed to make kids college ready, right? We talked about that a lot because once they got through college, then they would go on to their career. I think what we've learned, particularly through the pandemic and the Great Resignation, the big quit, is that people want they want to find their passion, their meaning, their purpose. And it isn't always a 4-year college degree. It might be a whole mix of things, right? It could be that on-the-job work-based learning experience. It might be an apprenticeship, an internship program. It could be a 2-year college degree. The career and technical education programs in our high schools, our area technical colleges provide a whole swath of skills training and credentials that help people get into their first job. There's so many open doors here. And I think that, as a state, if we're focused on driving a robust economy, we have to think about every possible avenue for every type of Coloradan, right? Whether it is that I want to go to a public institution, higher education institution, and get my degree in philosophy because I want to go on and teach, or I want to go to an auto mechanic school and learn how to fix a car because ultimately I want to be, I want to have my own auto body shop or whatever, right? It's those differences that I think the state has to do a better job of recognizing and then supporting. And that's where this evolution, I think, is right now. I think we're really trying to recognize that it isn't us telling people which path to take. It's providing all the opportunities through that, as you said so eloquently, one open door.
And maybe even for those people who want to go work on cars right now, but want to go back later to get that bachelor's degree to run their own business. I should say that House Bill 1317 passed out of its first committee, the House Education Committee, on March 24th with a unanimous vote. So things are going well so far. But one of the things that struck me about the first committee hearing was the fact that there were 0 opposition witnesses, but there were a number of groups seeking amendments to the bill. And if I could summarize all their concerns in one sentence, it would be, hey, we want a spot at the table as well. So how, kind of lastly here, how have you dealt with that overwhelming desire of so many groups to be a part of this task force putting together this new department? And what's it going to take to keep so many groups rowing in the same direction if this becomes law, and then particularly in the next couple of years as this department comes together?
Ed, this, it's an important point, and we see this a lot when the legislature puts together a study group, a working group, a task force, that a lot of interest emerges and everybody wants to be a part of that work. That is wonderful. That's a good thing. But you have to manage a working group. And if you've got a working group of 100, 200 people, it's difficult for everyone to be heard and for those voices to really connect with one another and facilitate something that's productive. So we have crafted our Transition Advisory Committee, TAC is what we're calling it, with 27 people that represent either business or higher education or our labor views, apprenticeships. We've got folks that are, consumers, our workforce centers and other state agencies represented in this conversation. But in the bill, we really push for robust stakeholding in all of these different interest groups, making a commitment to convene large groups from, say, higher education, for example. We've imagined pulling together a 2-day convening of faculty members and student members and leaders from a whole group of institutions, have them all come together and provide input for 2 days, talk about what's working, what's not, let's dream together, let's be as creative and brainstormy as we possibly can be to throw everything out and give that to this Transition Advisory Committee in a way that they can then take that input and cull it down, identify the themes, and hopefully make an actionable roadmap with a timeline that helps us achieve this reimagining of talent in this state.
So in other words, business leaders, if you are listening to this and you say, wait, I want my voice represented here, stay tuned. There will be opportunities for everyone to step up and contribute. Speaker Julie McCluskey, thank you so much for talking with us about this bill.
Ed, thanks for asking. It's been a delight.
Well, as mentioned in our interview with Speaker McCluskey, House Bill 1317 doesn't have opposition. So rather than spending the second half of the show on the con side of the argument, we're going to spend it instead with someone who can move us beyond the policy implications and help us to understand a little bit better what this proposal could mean for business. That someone is Shannon Nicholas, the Senior Vice President of Impact at Colorado Succeeds. For those of you who may not be familiar with the organization, Colorado Succeeds works with business leaders across the state to bring about changes to education and workforce training that will boost worker skills and increase the talent pipeline for employers. And I will say personally that for the 3 years I have been here at the Colorado Chamber focusing on workforce development issues, we have had no better partner in these aims than Colorado Succeeds. Shannon, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's lovely to be here.
Now, as I told Speaker McCluskey, the average employer might not think a governmental reorganization bill would be the key to helping them find skilled workers. Yet, this is the ultimate aim of putting all the state's workforce development and higher education initiatives under one roof. So tell me, in your mind, why is this so important for employers?
Yes, I totally agree that this is probably not top of mind for an everyday CEO or business leader, but we do need to care about it. Our state has limited resources, and the most important thing is that we're driving toward our priorities as a state, and we know that we want people who live here, people who grow up here to have jobs here. We need employers to have the skilled talent that they need. And so when the state is making decisions about where to put those resources, we want that to be a unified and simplified process. And I think what we're concerned with right now is there's too many people in charge of those various programs. And so an opportunity here is to rethink and reimagine how that might work better for employers and better for learners and job seekers.
So, ideally, in your mind, how would this department work as a one-stop front door for employers looking to partner with the state or with educators on talent development programs? What could this being under one roof mean?
So one hope that we have is that the state starts to prioritize in-demand sectors or comes up with a strategy for where do we need the most talent in our state and helps to organize that need from both the demand side of employers, but more importantly, from the supply side. So do we have enough learners getting into credential programs, industry certifications, apprenticeships, and advanced degrees so that they can fill that? The one-stop shop makes it easier for us to understand, are we filling that pipeline? Are employers validating that they are getting the talent that they need? And I think it puts a spotlight on the sectors that we need for our economy and helps ensure that we're putting all of the resources towards those different sectors in the most efficient ways. So that's our hope. I think there's also a governing element to this. You know, we need business at the table to help make those decisions. So in our ideal state, we have a governing body that is comprised of both business leaders as well as higher education and workforce training leaders. Right now, those agencies have different governing bodies, and so there's different decision-making happening. And so with some consolidated governing body, hopefully you would have more accountability to business, to the workforce. And then most importantly to me are, what are these unified goals? What are we working toward? A unified agency would have singular goals, would have a state plan. Hopefully we would have metrics that we could track that state plan by. So that's our hope, is that we have those kind of pillars of this unified agency and that business plays a key role in guiding that agency.
Yeah, I think when you talk to most employers, the thing they talk about as their goal is, I want to be able to find employees much more easily than I'm finding them today. I want to step back for a second. As someone who works so closely on this topic, why do you feel like we see so much of a gap today between the skills that employers need in their workers and the skills that job seekers are presenting?
Well, it's a tough challenge. I think a lot of folks are really well-intentioned. They do want to build programs that will help people get jobs. Unfortunately, we're asking business leaders to spend too much time defining what those skills and competencies are. My hope would be that that's done at a state level, that we could consolidate that information and then regions could take that information and localize it. I think what's happening right now is everyone's trying to do that in their own backyard. And so we're creating a lot of duplication of efforts. We're asking business to show up to way too many tables with not very clear asks. I think we know what we need the local communities to provide. It's work-based learning opportunities, it's more direct connection to training opportunities, to apprenticeship connections, and eventually to employment. But right now, those asks are getting spread across a variety of people. And again, you have really well-intentioned people who are showing up to these tables trying to be helpful, but they're not being leveraged or utilized in the way that we'd like to see. So hopefully we can create a more systemic approach, something that would guide people through the process. And then we also do need to acknowledge that there are some training programs that are not well suited to align to business. And perhaps we need to have conversations around how do we support those providers in getting more aligned with business's needs, or moving resources to the programs that are more effective. And so I do think there's an element to this of consolidating or looking at programming that maybe no longer serves our economy, and how do we move to future-facing programming.
Yeah, when you have 110 different workforce development initiatives, as the state has identified, I think there's probably a few whose time has come and gone. I want to go back, though, because you make a really good point that as much as we're talking about a State Department here, most employers, most local chambers, local economic development organizations think about this on a regional basis. And we saw that in the talent development summits that we work so closely on this year. How does this translate to localities? Obviously, this is the state putting everybody together in one department. Do you think that's going to be able to make it easier or harder for it to go down to, and now we're going to work on this by sector or by geographic region?
I'm optimistic that it will work if we still empower regions and localities to lead where they are best serving and leading. I've been really, really just so proud of our local chambers of commerce who've taken up workforce development as a strategy for supporting their business community. We have to honor that, validate that, and continue to fund that work. That's the state's responsibility, is to be really clear on what it wants to be getting in terms of outcomes, and then fund the local communities to do that work. I don't think it's the state's job to convene those sectors. I think it's the local regional groups who can do that. I do think that there is some sense making that the state can do around what the priorities should be, where our economy is going, data that we can be using to make better decisions that can help the regions and the locals. We collect a lot of data around K-12 and college going. Can they send that back to the regions to help the regions be more informed about what is happening in their communities? So there's definitely interaction and connectivity. We're working on a paper right now that will hopefully set up what's the difference between the state's role and the locals' roles. And I do think each one has roles in this education to workforce system, but we may need to refine that a little bit. I think we've gotten a little confused in Colorado about who does what.
With all the potential good that comes out of this, when you look at this, are there stumbling blocks you're worried about?
Yeah, there's a ton of stakeholders, right? This bill has 26 seats on a task force to kind of transitionally advise the next steps. Each of that 26 roles represents a stakeholder group that wants to be protective potentially of current funding, current programming, existing infrastructure that the state is providing them. And so we've done these task forces in Colorado before. I do believe that they can work. I do think that folks can come around an aligned set of priorities that can be then a roadmap for implementation. But a lot will depend on the next governor and what that person wants to do, what that vision is, what the leadership of that cabinet wants to implement. And so our best work is to set that up, to make sure that happens. And, probably to break this apart and take it in bite-sized pieces. We probably can't move all 100 programs at one time. But I think we would love to see it become a more efficient system, become more, streamlined, and hopefully find ways in which we could find wins for lots of those folks at the table.
So lastly, for the average employer who is listening to this right now and is asking, well, how is my life going to be different 5 years after this is implemented in regard to finding talent? What would you say? How do you break it down to that specific a level of what's this going to mean for employers?
Ideally, you will, as a business leader, feel like you have talent in your current business. You're not worried about what's going to happen when people retire or when, jobs change. But I do think we have to be really mindful that the economy is changing. We have lots of disruption coming. And so we need a government that is more able to handle that kind of change and can disseminate information back out to learning providers, to training, that can make those changes more quickly. So for a business leader, I hope that they stay in Colorado because they believe that there is talent here, that they want to invest and continue to build new kinds of companies, new kinds of industries and sectors. We have a really innovative business community. We want them to see this as a place where they're going to have the talent that they need, and that also that their current employees are taken care of, that they have all the things. We know that this is part of a broader ecosystem of challenges that Colorado faces. We don't want workforce to ever be something that they're concerned about, and we think that the state has a responsibility to help make that happen through quality training and workforce programming.
Excellent. Well, hopefully that gives everyone a little bit to take away from why we are spending 20 minutes this week talking about this bill that we think is so important to the future employers in the state. Shannon Nicholas of Colorado Succeeds, thank you so much for your work in supporting this bill and working on workforce development issues, period.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you to the Colorado Chamber of Commerce for all your leadership on this, too. We really appreciate it.
That's it for our interview segment. Now let's take a quick look at what you need to know about the week ahead. All right, let's talk about this week. After a 1-week delay, the budget bill will be introduced in the House on Monday. This, again, is a bill that seeks to eliminate a $1.5 billion budget shortfall by doing things such as cutting Medicaid provider reimbursements and potentially by asking Pinnacle Assurance to pay $400 million to disaffiliate from the state, a deal that the state-chartered workers' compensation insurer has distinctly not agreed to. Full debate in the House is likely for Wednesday and Thursday. Stay tuned. Speaking of things that have been delayed a week, the House Judiciary Committee discussion of House Bill 1236, the arbitration reform bill that was the centerpiece of last week's episode, is scheduled now for 1:30 p.m. Tuesday in House Committee Room 107. This bill would nix arbitration requirements in contracts if their filing costs are more expensive than the filing costs of going to court, and it would bar arbitrators with a history of bias toward one party or another, a term that is defined very loosely in the bill, from hearing cases. Sponsors say the bill is necessary to make a now ubiquitous arbitration process fairer for workers or customers. The Colorado Chamber and other business groups oppose the bill because they believe it interferes with contracts and with federal law governing arbitration. On Monday, the House Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee will hear 2 bills of concern to the agricultural sector. First on its 1:30 p.m. agenda in House Committee Room 107 is Senate Bill 62, a proposal to make it harder to use common rodenticide poisons to stave off rat infestations. The bill got pared back significantly in the Senate, but farmers and business groups like the Colorado Chamber say the restrictions still remain too onerous. Then third on the same committee's agenda is Senate Bill 121, which would require ag workers to work more than 56 hours a week to earn time-and-a-half overtime pay rather than the 48 hours they must now work. Farmers and some farm workers complain that the current standard is costing workers money because farmers will cap their hours when they reach overtime thresholds, and those seasonal workers want to make money during a season that is not year-round. But while business groups like the Colorado Chamber support this bill, some workers' advocacy groups oppose it because they say it singles out one group of workers for exemptions to the state overtime law. It passed the Senate on a 19-16 vote, and it's going to be close and generate significant debate in the House. Finally, on Tuesday afternoon, the Senate Finance Committee is scheduled to hear Senate Bill 116 in Senate Committee Room 357. The bill makes quite a few changes to tax law, but the one that is most concerning to business groups, and has gotten the Colorado Chamber and others to oppose the bill, is a requirement that lodging properties newly include resort fees and rental fees that they get from owners of condominiums within the property as part of their income. Change is expected to boost tax revenues from the sector by $16.7 million per year. The bill is scheduled fourth on the agenda for the 1:30 p.m. hearing. That's all for this episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. Once again, I'm Ed Seelover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. I'll keep the conversation going at tsscolorado.com, and we'll see you next time as we explore the issues that matter most to business.